Guys, my tiny house has a problem. There's no siding attached to it. Thankfully, I can fix it. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Jacob Newton, and in this video, we will be completing the marking on the tiny house. Let's get started. Now, the first order of business is marking out the studs, because while I can see them in here, I cannot see a dang thing out here. So, first order of business is mark out where each of the studs are on this wall with a Sharpie. And we are gonna do that by using this giant ladder, a stud finder, and a whole bag full of Sharpies. Let's get started. I first got the ladder into place. After that, I tested to make sure that a Sharpie was good. It works. Alright, I'm gonna show you how I plan on doing this. So right now, I can't see anything in front of me. But with the stud finder, I just press the button, go along it. Looks like I found a stud right there. Oh no. I have to scan deeper. As you can see, I had a problem. Oh, this is gonna be hard. Can't constantly be on the center. So here's the problem. Because the stud finder only works on wood and my exterior sheathing is wood, it's detecting the wood as studs, so we're gonna have to find a different solution. And that solution to the problem is a lot of work, but let me show you what I'm gonna have to do. So these studs on the wall, I have to measure from the end of the wall all the way over here. I'm gonna have to measure with a tape measure where the studs are, mark the location of each stud on this piece of paper, and then adjust my measurements for everything outside, and then mark it outside. Yeah, it's gonna be lots of fun. I began by quite simply measuring where the studs were with a tape measure and marking the measurements down on a piece of paper. That way, I could bring it outside to have it with me. As I was doing this by myself, I had to change where I had my tape measure hooked onto because it would have been incredibly difficult to try to keep the end on the same spot without it falling. Because I had to do it like this, I had to do some math to keep every measurement accurate. I continued the process of measuring and marking for the entire length of this wall. There were over 12 studs in each wall, which meant I had to spend a lot of time marking the location of each one. Okay, after going through the entire wall, I've made out all my markings, so now I can do it on the outside. So after completing my measurements, it looks like all I have to do is add 5 inches to every measurement I've made. That's the GoPro. So let me show you guys. I used the same tape measure to mark the stud from the outside with a permanent marker. Then, I connected the measurements I made with a 4-foot-long level to ensure that the markings were straight and level. Using the permanent marker ensured that these markings wouldn't be swept away from any type of weather, rain or shine. I was only able to mark 3 of the studs this day, because now that I have a job, it takes up time in the evening. And like that, that's all I can do for the day. I have work I need to go to, but this is a pretty good start. Yay. Alright guys, I'm back and I'm ready to do I plan on doing all of this today, and I brought my helper.
This dude right here happens to be my brother, and he only helped me because I said I would pay him to do so. But I am incredibly grateful that he helped me, so shout out to him. Because I had my brother to help me, the speed in which this part was finished was twice as fast than if I had done it myself. My brother held the end of the tape measure so it didn't fall, while I marked all the measurements on the wall. The process of marking the location of the studs is a long and tedious process. It's not necessarily hard, but it is incredibly repetitive work. These markings are incredibly important for the siding installation, as the build code for the siding requires them to be nailed into solid wall. These markings will allow me to know where to install nails when putting up the siding. Making the preliminary measurements from the inside was a crucial step in this process, as without them, I couldn't have marked on the outside. Steady progress was being made, and then this happened.
No! No! Cat, no!
If the cats, what are the cats doing?
Come on, no!
Cat, what are you do? This is not a playground! We're gonna have to rescue you guys!
No! No, don't you dare! No! No!
No, come on, Cat. Is that sugar or cinnamon?
Cinnamon!
Cinnamon!
Come on!
Cat wants,
No!
come on!
No!
Come on! No, come down! Please! Come on, Cat. Well,
Don't be a dumb kitty.
it's being a dumb kitty. And yeah, Sugar's just up there going, this is the life! After that peril, we continued to work on the tiny house. Soon, the bottom half of this side was finally finished.
Okay, wall 1 is complete. Let me show you the work that we've done. So we basically just marked out where every line right here that was marked with permanent marker means that there's a stud behind here. So all this line right here, this is a stud. This line right here, it's a stud. This line right here. Okay, we finished doing this wall, as you may remember. So now we're gonna do this wall.
What?
The next step in marking the location of the studs was the wall opposite the one we just did. This one also went smoothly, with my brother by my side. The exact same process was used from the last wall. The studs are measured with a tape measure and then marked down on a piece of paper. This wall went almost 10 times faster than previously, as I now had gained experience and some help. Using the measurements we had just obtained from the inside, my brother and I began marking the outside. We both had the same jobs. He held the tape measure, and I marked everything on the wall. Instead of making a line after every measurement, I made my measurements and then at the end, finished marking the lines. This window got in the way of making any measurements higher up the wall, so I had to use a level later on to make sure that those areas still got marked. Here I was nearing the end of marking the studs on this wall, and afterwards I finished marking the lines from the measurements we had just finished. This part was incredibly satisfying to do, as I basically finished this entire wall in 30 seconds. This was the last wall needed to complete for the lower walls. Note that I didn't do the front or the small side walls, as there was no studs to mark in these locations.
And like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are finished. Another day, some more marking. Let me tell you what we're gonna do today. So, all of these lines are not as tall as the joist should be. So I need to measure from the inside how tall the joists are. And then from knowing that, I can mark this top plate. So I can know the exact thickness of this and then start measuring this top layer. Alright, so we need to figure out how tall this stud is. This one right here. And I'm sure they're all the same length around, because if they're not, I did something wrong, but they are the same length. So we'll start there.
I ended up measuring twice right here, as I wanted to ensure that I had measured correctly. However, I decided to change how I measured the studs entirely.
Just 87.25. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Instead of measuring each of these studs 87.25 inches based on what I measured on the inside, I think what I'm gonna do is I know that these windows, this one, and the ones on the other side, all are on the top of that sill plate. So I think I just measure from the bottom of here to this window, and then continuing out on that line all the way to the edge, and that will be the top of the sill plate. And then because it's 3 2x4s thick, I just measure 4.5 inches down, because each 2x4 is 1.5 inches thick for some reason. And then by doing that, I have that sill plate marked out, and then I just continue the line from from what I have marked here all the way up to the bottom of the sill plate. I think that's a good plan, and I think I'm gonna do that. Let's do it.
This ended up being a great strategy, as all I had to do was mark where the bottom of the window was and then continue that line across the entire tiny house. By using this 4-foot level, I was able to keep the lines I marked perfectly straight. Here I can be seen using a tape measure to mark the thickness of that top plate. This ensures that I will always nail into a stud when I begin my siding. I continue to use the same methods of marking in this spot. I use the tape measure to check the thickness of the top plate and make a mark on the tiny house. Now that the top plate was all marked out, I extended the markings of the studs to meet the markings of the top plate. I ended up using the tape measure instead of the level because the level wouldn't fit in these small spots. In this small area around the window, I had to measure where the studs were on the bottom and then make markings above the window to guarantee that the markings were correct. I also wrote down what these markings meant, half because of utility reasons and half because it was fun to do so. This part was going along smoothly, as nothing got in my way of speed.
Alright, I finished that one side, so now I'm gonna finish up this side before I work on getting the top rows finished.
Using the same plan as the other side, I marked out the top plate first using the level to keep everything straight. This time around, I decided to mark the sill plate and extend the stud markings at the same time. This saved me lots of time having to move the massive ladder. Honestly, moving this heavy ladder through the weeds that were growing near my tiny house is one of the hardest things I had to do this video. Over this last window, all I had to do was mark the top plate, as the top plate extended below the trim of the window. Finally, I marked the bottom of the top plate.
Cha-ching.
The last task of the day was to finish extending the markings on this last wall.
All the lower walls are now marked out and complete. Next is to finally do that top part. This is gonna be fun. Okay, so when I looked at these studs right here, this one, and this one, all line up with this one, and that one up in the loft. So that makes it so that I don't have to mark those out. I just continue the line straight up from what I've already marked. Now, it does mean that I have to continue the measurements from here all the way along the side. So for this middle part right here, I have to use this ladder and then set it up, mark how far apart these are, and so on and so forth, including these upper little pieces, because I will be nailing into those. So yeah.
In this phase of measuring, it was slightly different than the bottom layer. I moved where I had the tape measure throughout the measurement process because it would have been difficult to keep it in place while balancing on a ladder. I also sometimes struggled to keep it in place anyway though. After finishing up one side, next was to finish the other side. I had to begin in the storage loft before making my way to the other loft. Changing where I measured from made it so much easier to continue my measurements throughout the entire wall. Don't worry, my measurements were still very accurate. Making these measurements were some of the easiest parts of the job. It was marking the measurements that turned out to be the difficult part. This was the last of the measurements I had to make, before finishing up marking the outside.
Okay guys, so I got them all measured, but that's all I'm gonna do today. I'll mark them all out tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday. I'll mark them all out Monday. Alright, it's time to finish up all the marking. Let's get it done today.
This was it, the final day of marking out the stud locations. Once completed, I knew I could get right into working on my siding. I once again hired my brother to be my helper, to ensure a swift workday. I made sure that he got the taller ladder, so he wouldn't have to strain to reach the necessary locations. The tough part about this job was figuring out how to reach the areas up high while trying our best to be safe. Don't worry, Mother, we were always 100% safe. After making some markings, I then moved the ladders around and kept on moving. This right here was incredibly tough. My brother had to get really high up on the ladder to ensure that our markings were straight, and he doesn't necessarily like heights. However, he persevered and we got the markings in the perfect spot. I had to readjust these markings because they were slightly off, but after the corrections, the markings were on point. We were soon almost completely finished with this wall, and we were about ready to move over to the other side. The last thing we had to do here was mark the stud locations above this window, and then we would be finished on this side. We had finally finished that other side, so now it was time to work on the other side of the tiny house. Now that we had made it to the other wall, we had found a rhythm, and we started to move very quickly. We both still had the same rules. He would hold a tape measure, and I would make the markings. Here I was just being silly, for absolutely no reason.
Catch. 1, 2. You're.
There we go. Try again.
I'll try again.
Wait,
Nope. 1, 2. Perfect.
After we finished tossing the tape measure around, we continued on with our work. At this point, we decided to switch up our measurement style. I had my brother go into the tiny house to measure the studs individually, and then checked his measurements with what I had written down. This process was much easier, so we kept the strategy up for the rest of the day. We were nearing the completion of this wall, and I was excited to be almost done with the marking process. This was it, the final part of this massive wall. We had finished marking all of the large walls, and all that was left was this end wall above my sliding glass door. Same as before, I had my brother on the inside telling me the measurements, and I marked them down on the outside. Here we go, almost done. And like that, all the marking on my tiny house is now completed. I'm so happy with how it looks. I'm very proud of it.
Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Ooh, sneak peek.